This is World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with your host, Carl Gruber. World Awakenings is a podcast dedicated to opening your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how they play an all-important role in our daily life. So join Carl on this enlightening experience as he interviews metaphysical and spiritual experts to discuss, debate, and delve deeply into the hows and whys of this worldwide awakening.
This is the show World Awakenings, a fast track to enlightenment. I'm your host, Carl Gruber. Now, since 2016, this show has taken a deep dive into the world of all things spiritual, enlightening, and metaphysical. And today's special guest is going to keep us on this same course. First, please take a moment to download your free copy of my ebook, The Three Pillars, a simple three-step process to manifest positive and permanent change in your life, a book that can put you on track to live the life you love and love the life you live. And who doesn't want that? So just click the link below in the show notes to get your free download today. Now, from M.I.T. engineer to video game pioneer and energy healer Brent Michael Phillips is our guest today. Brent has been described as a fusion of tech savant meets spiritual guide. His journey runs from founding groundbreaking tech startups to overcoming a personal health crisis through energy healing. Brent's unconventional path has led to profound insights into the power of the mind and how to harness that energy. He's also the author of the books The Formula for Miracles Part 3, The Journey Where Science Reveals the Secrets of Spirit, and also the book Movement Feedback Holography, How to Triple Your Income by Shaking Your Hands. That sounds very cool. His website and program he teaches is called Awakening Dynamics. And with that, Brent, welcome, man. I'm so excited to have you here. Thank you for being on.
Oh, it's great to be here. I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, you're 3 hours behind me too, so it's not too early there yet. But I really appreciate it, and you absolutely fascinate me with what you're doing. And I've been researching you and looking into your life, and you have a pretty amazing evolution of your life. You grew up as a scientist-oriented, fascinated with computers and technology, but then you overworked yourself keeping two companies afloat, and that resulted in physical injuries and surgeries. Can you tell us something about this?
Yeah, so, first thing I want everyone to know is, gosh, I never thought I'd be doing anything like this. If you had told me when I was a young man I'd be teaching people energy healing, innovating in that area, intuition, I would have laughed
Yeah.
because really I was just your typical nerd growing up, right? Back then we called them inside kids, right?
Yeah.
And I loved Dungeons and Dragons and Star Wars and Star Trek and all that kind of stuff. And the one thing I was fascinated with growing up was computers. Taught myself to program, wrote my first computer game when I was in sixth grade. And I really, I loved video games. I'd always wanted to be a video game developer. And so I ended up in college at MIT. And that's when I discovered the internet, which of course sounds funny today,
Mhm.
but this was back in the 1980s, right? No one had heard of the internet. And so I had this vision. I'm like, wow, I want to create video games that run on the internet.
Mhm.
That was really my passion. And so I was at MIT for, I like to think of myself as an overeducated dropout. Uh, as I got my bachelor's degree and my master's degree, and I was working on my PhD in what was called the Telemedia Networks and Systems Group, which basically we were learning how to send real-time audio video over the internet.
Mm.
And me and the two of my lab mates sent the first ever synchronized live audio video feed over the web in 1994.
Wow.
So this was really exciting stuff. We were part of the World Wide Web Consortium. I contributed code to Apache. It was a really exciting time. But I didn't want to be stuck in grad school for another 8 years. So the internet boom was happening all around me. So I left MIT and convinced my lifelong best friend to start up a company to build websites.
Mm.
And it's kind of crazy today, but the very first website I ever pitched or built was for the launch of the Sony PlayStation.
Really?
How's that, right? My very first website.
Yeah.
And so we had a lot of success at the first couple of years. I had 15 people working for me. And the website company, we did Nissan Motors, Disneyland. We had a lot of Fortune 500 clients. So we were really on a path to big success. That gave us the resources to start a second company to make video games,
Hmm.
to build up my passion, which was taking video games and network enabling them. And so we created the world's very first real-time, what today you call a MOG or MMORPG,
Hmm.
which was called Underlight. And it was, 10 years ahead of the rest of the field. But as you mentioned, I was the primary developer and executive and manager for two fast-growing internet companies at the same time.
Yeah, a lot of stuff.
And
Yeah.
yeah, the 100-hour work weeks took me out.
Oh,
That it started with a little tingle and stiffness and pain in my arms, but very quickly accelerated to just crushing chronic pain. I went from working 100 hours a week to 80 to 60 to 40 to about 20. And I was spending, 3, 4, 5 hours a day in physical therapy. And this was difficult, but I figured, with my best friend as my partner, we'd get through it. And long story short, I spent 3 years doing all sorts of physical therapy with doctors and all these things, and I didn't get better. I got worse.
wow.
And it all came to a head in 1998 when I finally got in to see the head doctor at the Kerlin Jobe Physical Therapy Clinic.
Hmm.
And, that's where all the athletes, professionals, Olympians, Lakers, Dodgers, they all go there. And I thought, wow, this guy will know what to do, right? I actually had the dates circled on my calendar, kind of like you would for the day you get your driver's license or going to a concert you love, right?
Yeah.
And I was so excited. I'm like, I'm going to get my life back. He'll know what to do. And I walked in and he's looking at my files and he just goes, well, I'm sorry, son. There's nothing I or any doctor can do.
Oh,
You'll never be able to work again and you'll never be out of pain.
oh, wow.
And I was like, I was so stunned, I was speechless. And I remember as I left, he said, I'm going to do you a favor and recommend you for permanent lifetime disability now. And I hope someone can take care of you until you die.
And how old were you at
I
this
was
point?
27 years old.
Oh, wow.
And he recommended me for lifetime disability, which is actually very rare at that young of an age.
Hmm.
It's usually only people that have paralysis or missing limbs or really horrific injuries. But I was so disabled by the pain, the doctors literally gave up on me. And when I told my best friend and business partner, I figured he'd be all, don't worry, Brent, we'll get through this, right? He turned on me, fired me from the position at the companies I had founded, stole both of them from me. There was forged documents. I mean, a whole bunch of nasty stuff that went on. And I didn't learn until a little bit later. It's all because he was secretly dating the woman I was crazy in love with and seeing.
Oh,
And so it was a real wipeout, sort of a textbook dark night of the soul. And I was depressed. I was day drinking. I was using drugs. I mean, I wanted to die. That I was in terrible constant pain. I had lost two multi-million dollar companies. My entire life and education was now totally worthless. Couldn't do anything with it anymore. And I was living it with my parents, uh, spending all my time and energy just trying to get through the day.
hmm.
And I was very lucky that I didn't kill myself with drugs or something, that I had a friend of mine get me into positive thinking. He was like, hey, Brent, when life's got you down, this is what we need positive thinking for, right? Today we call it the law of attraction.
Yeah.
Back in the 90s, we called it positive thinking. It's the same stuff.
Hmm.
So I went overboard, became like this crazy positive thinking warrior for about 6 months. I went to the talks and I danced on the stage. I made vision boards and said my mantras every day and all these things, but nothing changed. So I gave up on that, back to drinking and drugs. I had another friend pull me out of it and say, Brent, don't give up yet. There's all sorts of things in alternative medicine you need to try. And so that gave me some hope. I thought, wow, maybe there's something here. So long story short, I spent 5 years basically as a full-time patient going to every kind of alternative medicine I could, racked up an almost six-figure credit card debt. homeopaths, osteopaths, chiropractors. I did all sorts of crazy cleanses and diets. I was using magnets. I mean, I could go on and on and on. All these things I did, but it was the same thing. Nothing made any difference. I just kept getting worse. Then my parents divorced. I didn't have anywhere to live. That was frightening. And as sort of a last ditch effort to get more money on disability, I agreed to have a surgery,
Mm.
which was, again, in context, it led me to a new life. But at the time, it seemed like a horrible mistake because they botched the surgery. And when I woke up, my right arm was paralyzed. So it was like, wow, now I couldn't really even drive my car safely. I needed help getting dressed. I needed help cutting my food. And that was really the rock bottom. And my arm was paralyzed for almost 6 months. And I tried all sorts of physical therapy and all these things, and nothing helped. Then I went to see this crazy healer lady. Her name was Terry. And she had learned some system of energy healing involving the subconscious and theta brainwaves. And my Aunt Lauren was an old friend of hers, and she convinced me to try it. And I was like, yeah, Lauren, sounds nuts. I don't want to do it. Stupid, waste of money, right? But eventually Lauren's like, hey, Brent, I'll pay for your first session. Just go. What else are you going to do? I'm like, well, sure. Okay. At this point, I'm on lifetime disability, racking up credit card debt, just waiting for, bankruptcy and everything to implode. And so I had a session. I went to see Terry, and she asked me a lot of questions about all the trauma I'd been through growing up, what had happened with my best friend, losing my career, the horrific pain I'd been through, all these things. And I'm like, this is interesting, but I'm here because I can't move my arm, right? We'll talk about my feelings later. That didn't seem important. And that's a key insight, right?
Yeah.
So I thought it was just a bunch of nonsense. And so she did this block clearing thing with me, and it was interesting. And at the end of our hour, she's like, okay, Brent, we're going to heal your arm. And I'm like, yeah, lady, you and what army, right? I had been to all these different orthopedists and physical therapists, and nothing they were doing was working at all. And it was so crazy because there was no hands-on. This is all done with the mind.
Mhm.
So she's sitting across the room from me, and she kind of closes her eyes and goes into a trance. And I'm sitting there looking out the window, thinking about what I want to get for lunch on the way home, right? I was just kind of bored. I'm like, yeah, let's get this done with. And out of nowhere, there was this loud crack and pop in my elbow. Similar to, the aches, the pops and cracks we all get with age, but like times 100.
Mm.
It was like, my whole body reverberated for a moment. And I was like, whoa. And I remember Terry opened her eyes. She said, okay, let's try your arm now. And I could not believe it, but I got my arm back. It instantly healed.
Wow.
And I was so blown away. I'm like, oh my God, Terry, I don't know what just happened, but please teach me.
Yeah.
And that's, when this very nerdy, dyed in the wool uh, agnostic software engineer found the divine, found my, not only a new career, but a whole new way of living.
Wow. What a story, Brent. I mean, is the movie coming out of your life yet?
That would be awesome. I don't know who you get to play me, but
Yeah, right, right. But so let's go back. I mean, so really, the issue with your arm, the problem with your arm originated in stress from
yes,
the job.
absolutely. Yep.
And I think that's one thing that anybody who studies healing, they realize that literally every injury and illness is based in stress, which
Even
starts,
medical doctors will acknowledge that now.
yeah, yeah.
And I mean, I was under so much stress. I didn't realize it at the time. It took me a couple decades to piece together the puzzle. But part of it was I had a lot of PTSD from things that had happened as a child.
Hmm.
That screwed me up. I had contracted chronic Lyme disease when I was at MIT.
Oh,
That took me almost 20 years to understand and discover and remedy. I was suffering from chemical poisoning from aspartame because I had been a Diet Coke addict through, all of high school, college, grad school, through my early career.
oh.
So that was slowly poisoning me. I had lived until I was in my 40s with undiagnosed autism. People that just thought I was weird or, different, eccentric.
Hmm.
So there were a lot of pieces to the puzzle. The short version, as one person put it, your mother loaded the gun and your best friend pulled the trigger. So
Oh,
that's kind of what happened.
yeah. Yeah.
And, when I discovered energy healing, it was funny. I figured, well, this woo-woo stuff should be easy compared to what I'm used to doing, engineering, right? And I figured 3 to 6 months, I'll have it all figured out. Kind of an arrogant perspective.
Mm.
Well, it took me 10 years, but I eventually figured it out. And it was so funny because at first, all the energy healing and intuitive work was really hard for me. I really struggled with it, and no one could put their finger on it. Years later, I understood it's because I had gotten so much into my mind, especially at MIT. I had completely disconnected from my body. And
Yeah.
that was another big factor in why I destroyed my health. I
You
was so disassociated, I couldn't feel the damage I was doing to my body until it was too late.
so scientifically based that, I've got to have hard evidence, got to
Yep,
have, and that was
exactly.
kind of a block to allowing yourself to learn more about energy healing. But
Yep,
I did read that you went through another bankruptcy and then you met
yeah.
a mentor who helped you out with that.
Yeah, and so if we had been doing this interview 20 years ago, then I have my first session of healing and my arm instantly heals and you live happily ever after. But of
Mhm.
course, that's not real life, is it? And so I was able to recover a lot of my health, build a new career as a healer, and then it all blew up again in a relatively short period of time. First, I had met a woman, gotten married, she left me. Then I was seriously injured in a car accident, and that was pretty horrible. Then I had cancer. Then I got migraines. I mean, I could go on and on and on. I had a girlfriend after my first marriage who was killed by a drunk driver. I mean, there's so many things that happened. My father died, and basically, I went into another dark night of the soul. My business cratered. I went deep into debt, and long story short, I had hired a criminal as my financial advisor.
Oh no.
And all the money I had made, he had stolen from me. Took out fraudulent loans. And long story short, when I realized what was happening, I was over $1 million in debt.
Wow.
And talking to a lot of people, they're like, Brent, only way out is bankruptcy. And so that in some ways was even more difficult. And it was a true story that I declared bankruptcy on November 10th, 2008. And it really felt like my life was over. One of my best friends from MIT was coming through LA that week. And he really wanted to see me, but I lied to him and said I had the flu because I didn't have $5 to have a cup of coffee with him. I mean, that's how tight it was after the bankruptcy. But it was the very next day that I met the late Dr. Carl Wolf. And we got to remember at this point, I'd been a full-time energy healing practitioner for 5 years. So it's not like I was new to this stuff, right? I had 15 different certifications and different modalities and techniques. And I met Carl, and he had come highly recommended to me by my life coach. And Carl met me down at the beach, which seemed a strange place for a session. And he asked me to rent rollerblades and put them on and then rollerblade in a circle in the parking lot while he videotaped me. And I'm like, is this like some kind of hidden camera show? I mean, this just seemed nuts, right? So I did it and I, skated around the lot 8 times or whatever. And he just, held the camera. And then we went and sat in his car and he played the video and he watched me. And basically, what it felt like to me was he watched my video and just ripped me a new one. It was all this criticism about how my energy was bad and I was leaking here and I wasn't, all this stuff, right? And then I went home and I was actually pissed, really pissed. And I called my life coach, Brian, and I chewed his butt off. I'm like, dude, what the heck is wrong with you, right? I spent $500 to have this crazy old guy videotape me rollerblading and tell me that my life is screwed up. I already knew that, right? That would have been like a year of Starbucks for me. And I remember what Brian said. He goes, Brent, I understand it's weird. He said, do me this favor, give it 3 weeks. And if nothing shifts or changes in your life in 3 weeks, let me know. I'll see if I can make it right, you
Mm-hmm.
know, because I did recommend him to you. And I was like, okay. And I remember I marked on my calendar, like 3 weeks out, call Brian, chew his butt off again, right? And the craziest thing was it didn't take 3 weeks. It didn't even take 3 days. So I met Carl on Tuesday afternoon. And long story short, by Thursday night, I had made over $50,000. And it didn't make any sense. It just, business came out of nowhere. I had sold out my next class. I was booked solid for 2.5 weeks in private sessions. And I was like, what the heck is going on here? And I called Brian. I'm like, dude, I have to apologize that this Carl guy is magic. This is one of the best things that's ever happened to me. And long story short, what I learned from Carl was that he was the first person that could put his finger on the problem. I was so deep into my mind that I couldn't feel my body. I was totally disconnected from life force. And a lot of that was childhood trauma. And then the adulthood stuff, just pounded nails into the coffin. And so his work was so different than anything else I'd done because I had learned Psych K and I had learned Reiki healing and emotion code and, a little bit of NLP. I'd learned all these things and they all kind of worked on a similar basis, right? That, well, we use a technique to identify subconscious blocks and work through them. But what Carl did was totally different. It was physical and visceral and immediate. It's about what you're feeling in your body at the moment. And it was interesting. It took me almost 2 years to have any sense of what was happening. But what I really understood from working with him, he had created really what I consider a whole new generation of technology. That if we look at self-improvement, I see it as 3 generations of technology. That the first generation is sort of the old school positive thinking, law of attraction.
Mm-hmm.
Think and Grow Rich, The Secret, things like that, right? Think positively, join a mastermind, vision board, mantras, all that stuff, right? The trouble is for a lot of people, it doesn't move the needle. Lots of people spend a lot of money doing that stuff and get very little in terms of results. The reason is simple. It has no way to directly access and work with the subconscious, which is where most of your power is. So things start to get really interesting in the second generation. That's things like NLP, Psych K, hypnosis, healing codes, emotion codes, things like that. And they are all very similar modalities in that they have different ways of identifying subconscious blocks, usually using muscle testing. And then sometimes they have a prayer or a tapping or a machine or something to clear it. But it's all kind of the same paradigm. And the second generation, that's when we start to see medical miracles, like I did with Terry. Why? We're directly accessing and working with the subconscious. So you start to see some results, especially with physical and emotional health. Second gen techs can be really powerful. And I still teach and practice a version of that. But what I learned from Carl was a whole new level, what I call the third generation. And the third generation of the technology is involving both physical movements and learning how to read energy, both visually, auditorially, and kinesthetically, in order to essentially get more life force back into ourselves. The way I would describe it is the reason my life was such a mess. I was super smart, IQ higher than Einstein. I had a perfect straight A average through the most difficult major at MIT, which is a very rare thing, almost unheard of. And yet my life was destroyed. I was one of the world's leading experts on internet programming in the mid 90s. I should have been incredibly successful, but it was so much worse than that. It wasn't just that I had a job and a middle class life. I had nothing. I was sofa surfing, living on leftovers. I had, constant pain. And the reason was simple. I had totally disconnected myself from the life force, what's called chi or ki or prana.
Mm-hmm.
And what Carl Wolf taught me how to do was how to fix that, how to get reconnected back into your body, into the flow of life. And that's how, in just about an hour and a half with Carl, I made 50 grand within 2 days. And the third generation involves open eye entrainment meditations, physical movements of the body, as
Hmm.
well as the study of what you might call deep spirituality. Um, in the East, they call it Advaita Vedanta. In the West, we call it non-duality or awakening. But it's a radical redefinition of how you think about yourself in life. You
Let,
put it together, I mean, it is beyond life-changing.
let me go back for a moment. When you first met this mentor, Carl Wolf, and I like him because he spells Carl with a K. Like,
Yes.
um,
The German style, I believe.
yeah, jawohl. But just simply by watching you rollerblade, he could read your energy, and you
Yes.
call that movement feedback holography, right? And
Yep, that's exactly right.
I mean, how I just by observing that, it's hard for me to wrap my head around that.
It is, and it seemed like magic to me at first too. It's kind of funny that he was one of the ghostwriters for T. Harv Eker, who was a big wealth building guru in the 2000s. And one of his books was called Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. I remember going to his seminar. There was like 2,000 people at the LAX Hilton back around 2004. He was a big deal for a while. And one of the claims he made was he would say, I can talk to someone for 30 seconds and tell you about how much money they make.
Hmm.
And that seemed like a magic power to me, right? Something out of the X-Men. Well, and I think he learned that from Carl, that Carl had this ability to just watch someone's movement. And the way I understand it as a software engineer is I think in terms of source code and applications. So Carl had this ability that I learned from him, and now I teach and practice it, how to watch someone's movement and see right into their source code, see
Wow.
what's really going on in their life. And as any programmer knows, when you have access to the source code, you can make your program do almost anything.
And
And
then why is it called movement feedback holography then?
so that what that comes from, that's the term, the name I gave it, and Carl loved it and started using it.
Okay.
So it's because it is based on movement,
Uh-huh.
that you do a movement. You might be rollerblading, you might be shaking your hands, you might be doing a roll up. That we have a whole set of movements we use. And what happens is a trained facilitator can watch your movement and tell you the energy they're reading, seeing into your source code,
Hmm.
what I call the software of the soul. And so that's the feedback. Is an expert facilitator can look at your movement and say, you're running this energy, you're running this energy, you're running this energy. And then we have processes to shift it to. And it's called holography because the human is a holographic representation of the universe, that our bodies and minds are essentially holographic projectors. And it works on the principle how you do anything is how you do everything. Why is that? You're bringing the same you, aren't you?
Hmm.
So I could watch you brush your teeth or play Pac-Man or drive your car or eat spaghetti. And I'm going to read the same energy because you're bringing the same source code wherever you go. And it is irrational at first. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But when you're able to read the energy and take it in and shift it, profound transformations happen. Really profound. And long story short, I still teach the second and third generation. The first gen, not as much because the world doesn't need another book on the law of attraction. There's plenty of books and coaches and YouTube channels. Go crazy, guys, right? Rehashing the same old material. So the second generation, working with beliefs and muscle testing, I still find very effective, especially for physical healing. So if someone has cancer, migraines, a broken bone, an injury, allergies, we can often knock those out in 30 minutes or an hour. So very good for that. What it doesn't do very well is confidence, presence, career, money.
I was wondering about that. How does him observing you on rollerblading result in you having a better
Yes.
financial income?
So the best metaphor I can give is this, that imagine that you and me are in spacesuits floating up in outer space. Then, and let's say we're 10 feet apart. I can be doing flips and jumping jacks and moving all around, but my movement has no effect or impact on you. Why? There's in the void of space. So we can both be moving manically and we do not affect each other at all. Now, if we come back down to earth and we jump in a hot tub, it's a different story, huh?
Mhm.
We can sit in the hot tub 10 feet apart. And if I start moving my body around, it affects you because of the water is a medium between us. And so what I learned was that from Carl is when we live too much in the mind, it disconnects us from the world around us. It's like being in outer space. And you can exert enormous energy and effort. You can be smart and talented and hardworking, but all that effort achieves little or nothing because you're not connected to the space around you.
Hmm.
When you're very present, very connected to the space, every action, every thought, every word creates a resonant effect in the universe. And so it's really, I talk to my students about we get the toothpaste back in the tube. That it's pretty simple to understand this, that if I ask most people, can you take your hands? Can you move, say, your middle finger? Most people can do that, can't they?
Hmm.
Sure. Now do that with your toes.
Yeah.
You can't. But here's the crazy thing. Anatomically, the hands and the feet are almost identical. They have the same bones and ligaments and tendons and stuff and muscles. They're just different ratios. So there's no anatomical reason you can't move your toes like you can your hands. The difference is our hands are filled with life force. They're aware and conscious because we spent our whole lives using them. Our feet, we bind up and walk around on artificial surfaces,
Yeah.
and we've squeezed the life force out of it,
Mm.
just like squeezing the toothpaste out of the tube. And when you lose the life force in part of your body, that disconnects you from the space around you.
Mm.
And so by doing special movements and the meditation aspect, what we call beaming people with energy, we're refilling ourselves. We're reconnecting parts of our body that we've lost. And the more consciousness you get back into your body, the stronger you're connected to the space around you. And so even a small action can create a big result.
Right.
And that's why I love to work with people who are intelligent, driven, passionate, talented, but wonder why their lives are crap or maybe mediocre.
Hmm.
What Carl Wolf used to say is when you live from the mind, you can make a living, but you'll never make a killing. And that's what happens. I've worked with so many people that have been so close to success over and over. I mean, I've been so close to being a millionaire. There's been at least a dozen times I was that close, and it always fell apart at the last moment. Crazy stories I could tell about it. And that's all an indicator that you've gotten disconnected from life force. And the good news is there is a way to reconnect you. If you remember the $6 million man from the 70s,
Oh, yeah.
we can rebuild him. We can make him stronger. That's what I want people to hear. If you've struggled, if you've suffered, if you had all these weird things happen, right? A health crisis, weird coincidence, and you're not getting to that next level in life, this is usually why.
Well, I was just curious because I had read that you are the only person on the planet that's ever been given permission to teach and practice this work. And is that really true and
It
why?
is. It is. There was one other guy who was given permission by Carl, and he died 2 weeks later.
Oh, oh, wow.
Crazy. His name was Nick. I don't want to gossip beyond that.
Uh-huh.
But Carl started doing this work in the 1970s. That his story, long story short, is he was a reincarnated Siddha. And he wanted to be a white guy from New York so he could bring this powerful spiritual and energy work to a whole new audience. And he died when he was born and remembered who he was. And he started working with people in the 1970s. And it's crazy. He told me years after I met him, of course, we became good friends. He was my son's godfather. To give you an idea how close we were, when my only child, my son, was born, there were only two people in the operating room that weren't doctors or nurses or the mother, and that was me and Carl.
Hmm.
So we were both there, right? He said, Brent, when I first met you, you were deeper in your head than anyone I'd ever known. And he'd been doing this full time for 35 years at that point. And so it's really ironic that when he first met me, he thought I was the most screwed up, broken person he'd ever seen in his life. But yet I'm the one that kept showing up and kept doing the work. And 10 years later, it was funny that it was about 2 weeks before Carl passed away. He was on a long bike ride and he got hit by a truck.
Ooh.
Uh, big truck, it'll lost control and just, squash, like stepping on a bug. And it was about 2 weeks before that, we were co-teaching a class together, my Awakening Intensive, my highest level group. And he was talking to us about death. And that's when he said, Brent, I'm giving you the full permission to teach and practice this, something I've never done before,
Hmm.
except for Nick, who he gave the permission and Nick died. But I guess I'm supposed to be here.
Yeah.
And so, what I would say is, hey, learn whatever you want from anybody. There are other of his students out there. It's just many of my students, I've worked with them and they come back to me. They go, yeah, Brent, there's a reason Carl gave you the permission.
Hmm.
That I'm the only one that actually understands this.
Hmm.
Even Carl didn't understand it. He used my terminology and used my explanations because he had the talent. He could do it, but he had no idea what he was doing or how it worked. I
Interesting.
came in as the engineer, as the scientist,
Yeah.
and said, let's figure this out. Let's reverse engineer it. And I reverse engineered Terry and Carl and many other incredible healers, teachers, shamans, intuitives, gurus. So I don't know everyone in the world, but I've never met anyone that has a deeper understanding of this.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I can explain exactly how this works. And that honestly, I think is my best superpower.
Well, we are speaking with Brent Michael Phillips. This is just amazing, amazing stuff. I love that part where he said you were in your head more than anybody
Yeah.
has ever seen before, and now here you are teaching it. But one thing that I find really interesting, you practice something called muscle testing, which was
Yes.
researched and pioneered by Dr. David Hawkins. How did you come about finding out about this and using it?
Well, it was I learned that through Terry originally.
Hmm.
The basis of most of the second gen in technologies, things like Psych-K, theta healing, etc., is they use muscle testing to ask questions of the subconscious,
Yes.
which
Hmm.
is so powerful because what you believe consciously in the frontal lobe is less relevant.
Hmm.
99% of your power is in the subconscious. And the subconscious is code. It's software. That's exactly what it is. Greg Braden wrote a great book about this called The God Code.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
goes, yes, the subconscious in DNA is just software. It's code. And so your whole life is created by the code that's inside of you. That's why I call it the software of your soul.
Hmm.
Just like you're using your computer, your phone, whatever, there's a bunch of programs written in code sitting on it, right? You execute one and it creates the display. So you got your web browser, right? You got your email app or whatever it may be. Our lives are exactly the same way. You have a program inside of you that controls every area of your life. You have code that determines how much money you make, which, by the way, is why me and Carl and T. Harv Eker could read your code and tell you about how much money you make just by watching you move.
Hmm.
You have code that determines your physical health, your emotional health, your level of happiness, satisfaction, your social life, how busy you are, how much free time you have. It's all coming on the inside. The problem is most of us are living ass backwards. Not a surprise. Most people are kind of miserable.
Hmm.
And you've been trained to live backwards. And the best way to explain this, I remember in the 90s, there was a joke that circulated that went something like this. Hey, Carl, how do you know when a blonde has been using your computer?
How?
There's black marker and whiteout all over the monitor. So that's funny, right?
Yeah.
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 We're allowed to tell jokes, right? As long as they're clean, right?
Really?
Yeah. Nowadays, people get offended so easily. It's kind of annoying, right? Like, I think if George Carlin were alive today, he'd be canceled in 10
Oh
seconds,
yeah. Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
it's funny because we all know that drawing on your monitor is not going to fix your software, right? But that's exactly how we're trained to live our lives. that the amount of money you make is not about, your Starbucks or your avocado toast. It's about the code on the inside. And most people exert enormous effort spending their whole lives drawing on the monitor. Medical science is like this for the most part. You go to a doctor, they run a bunch of expensive tests, it puts numbers on a piece of paper, and they give you a bunch of expensive toxic drugs to move those numbers around.
Mm-hmm.
It's drawing on the monitor. And if your software isn't working, if you don't mind constantly redrawing your monitor over and over again for the rest of your life, okay. But you're never going to fix the problem, are you? Just like you go to a doctor, they don't want to cure you. They want to put you on 19 drugs that you have to come back every 2 weeks for the rest of your life. That's how they make money, right? So the whole world has been training us to draw on the monitor. What I want to show is hey guys, muscle testing and energy healing and these things, we can access the source code.
Well, this is great. I love your analogies. Modern medicine is like drawing on the monitor.
Yeah.
Now,
It makes it look correct for a short time,
for a short time,
but
yeah.
you just got to keep redrawing and there's no end to it.
Well, tell us now about, I'm fascinated by this too, your awakening dynamic system that involves a formula for miracles. Boy, I really want to hear about that.
Yeah. What I did was that this is one of 3 impossible things I've done that I'm very proud of. It took me about 12 years. But what I did was I synthesized the best of the first generation positive thinking, law of attraction, the second generation with working the subconscious, NLP, hypnosis, things like that, and the third generation, Carl Wolf's work. And the framework I use is David Hawkins' scale of consciousness. And so it's the only system that, one, it is a complete system. There's really nothing it can't do. And it's internally consistent, which is so important. Now, that word probably doesn't mean a lot to people, but it means that it always makes sense no matter how big of a smaller a piece you take. So, for example, the government is not internally consistent. This piece over here is working against this other piece, right? Religion is not internally consistent. You have this teaching over here, which directly contradicts this teaching over here, right? And what I did was I wanted to synthesize the best, most developed technology for each of the 3 generations. And this would give people the tools to create almost any shift or change they're looking for. It's very much, again, like you're a programmer, you get the source code, you have the right tools. When I was a software engineer, I like to brag. I would say, I can make a computer do almost anything. It's just a matter of how long it takes and how much it costs.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that was very challenging for me to reconcile, if we look at your typical self-improvement law of attraction teachings, they'll tell you that we're all powerful beings and that we can have a life of our dreams and make all this money, right? That's essentially manifesting from the ego. It's not a wrong thing, but that's what it is, right? The
Mm-hmm.
ego says, I want money, you get money. So that's very much a part of, in Hawkins' scale, the Victor consciousness, 200 to 500.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the home base of our culture. We're a bunch of separate beings competing on this world, trying to get more money, more cars, more houses, more attractive partners, etc. Right? And so we have to reconcile that with the greatest spiritual teachings we have from people like Jesus and Buddha that have told us that we're all one and we're all connected. There's no separation. We need to be present and let go and surrender. And so on the surface, those are completely in opposition, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How can life be about get what you want and at the same time be actually about let go of all that and surrender? It cannot be reconciled at that level. Reminds me of one of my favorite Einstein quotes. He said, we cannot solve the major problems we face with the same kind of thinking that has created them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's where the non-duality comes in.
Mm-hmm.
That it's a complete paradigm shift in how you think about what are you, and that's where it starts. And most people, if I said, hey, what are you? Most people would say, we think we're some kind of separate being. Maybe you're a man or a woman, or maybe you're a soul that's created a body for one life and then you're sent to heaven or hell, or maybe you're some kind of reincarnating spirit that, you're a human, and if you're bad, you come back as a slug, and if you're good, you come back as a princess, whatever it may be, right?
Uh-huh.
I'll just say that's the level of thinking that you cannot solve the problems in life. That what we're taught is wrong. It's oversimplified and asked backwards. What I want to offer to everyone that's interested to go deep down the rabbit hole is there's a new way at looking at life that collapses all the problems, that makes it all work. Kind of similar to what Einstein did with relativity.
Mm-hmm.
That, he had the famous question, what happens if you're on a train going at the speed of light and you turn on a flashlight? Is the light coming off of that going at double the speed of light? The answer is no. It's still going at the speed of light. That seems like it can't be reconciled. That's what I want people to see.
Mm-hmm.
There is a way of thinking that solves all the problems, but it's not easy. If I could explain it in 3 or 10 minutes here, I would. But that kind of rewiring takes time. It takes most people about a month
Well,
to really get it into your mind and start seeing the world in a new way.
I do kind of want to ask you this, and I think you kind of touched on this already. You propose that there's no real spirituality to be found in most energy healing and law of attraction programs.
Correct. Yes.
How is that so?
So here's the terminology I would use. I like to make a distinction between metaphysics and spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
They're both useful. They're both important. One is not superior. Uh, one's an apple, the other's an orange. They're different things. Almost all the energy healing self-improvement material is metaphysics. Why? It's starting from the place of you have an ego and a desire, and we're going to give you a means to realize that desire. And that's not a bad thing in any way. So I want to make money. Okay, go do X, Y, and Z, and then you make money. Oh, I have pain or I have a disease. Well, go do A, B, and C, and it will heal it. So it kind of leaves in place the idea of you and God and the world, but gives you tools to manipulate on the non-physical level.
Mm-hmm.
So almost all the energy healing I learned was all metaphysics. And that's, again, it's not a bad thing. Spirituality is about asking the questions no one stops to ask. Starting with, what are you? That most of us spend our entire lives assuming we know what we are. But if I really push you on it, almost everyone that hasn't studied it deeply will admit, I don't know what I am. What is consciousness? How is it that you are the hologram of God? You're not just a little part of it, you're the whole thing. That doesn't fit, does it?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is what we call the process of awakening. So spirituality is about your paradigm for existence. What are you? What are the other people around you? Where does the universe come from? What is the nature of the divine? That's the spiritual piece. And again, both are useful and important. I have just, I've been doing this full time for over 20 years. I have certified in like 47 different modalities because I love learning. I'm one of those people, right? Oh, let's learn this. Let's learn this. I love learning. I've read at least a couple thousand books. I've done almost 20,000 private sessions as a practitioner. And uh, I come away going, wow, the metaphysics is important, but what really moves the needle in your life is the spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
And the closest answer I have found, I mean, I love Buddhist philosophy. I think there's a lot of great teachings there. I love the Vedas. To me, those are the two best places to find the truth. And what's one of those crazy things, once you get it, it seems so obvious. You know, I remember like growing up taking math in school, you'd look at the textbook and see the equation and you're like, this seems really difficult and hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point you get it and it just seems obvious and easy. And that's what awakening is. That's why I call it the beginning of the end of suffering. And so my goal with Awakening Dynamics is to do both. I'm going to give you the state-of-the-art metaphysics. I've found the easiest way to teach people intuition. I can teach you how to do deep theta wave instant healings in about 2 hours. That's all it takes.
Now,
Um,
speak,
mhm.
I'm sorry, speaking of instant healings, I read that you facilitated 1,900
Yeah,
instant healings. Can you tell us some of the dramatic
sure.
that happened?
Um, yeah, the very first one was actually my first wife after I had first learned healing. I was so amazed she had a sore throat, was supposed to go out with her friends she was going to cancel. So we did some muscle testing and block clearing and did a healing, and she felt great. Now, that's small, but that was just the foundation.
Yeah.
My second healing, which was so amazing, was one of the guys that worked for my video game company. He had lifelong asthma, and I had never worked on asthma before. I just applied the process I learned from Terry. We did one session over the phone. And he said the next day he went out, rode his bike for 25 miles in the middle of the spring and had no reaction.
Wow.
So his asthma was gone. I had a cat, not my cat, but a client's cat, who had something heavy fall and break her arm, and the vet wanted to put her down, a kitten. And so we did healing, and the next day the bone was healed. The cat was running around and fine, and he took the cat back to the vet. There was no damage. And the vet thought that they were like playing some game. They had switched cats. Uh, I've had a handful of clients with HIV that's gone undetectable.
Hmm.
And I use that terminology because you can never know for sure if someone's, quote, fully healed or cured. All we can know with a laboratory test is if the virus is detectable. So it went undetectable. Worked with a number of people with cancer. And, is my success rate 100%? No, I want to be honest too. This is not magic. It's not a magic wand that makes everything in the world exactly the way you want. As far as I know, there is no such thing. So I've seen many instant healings on cancer. To me, the easiest are allergies. I can heal most allergies in under 10 minutes, permanent. And it sucks that I even have a program, an audio program that I embedded this in with a special technology I developed so people could do it on their own without needing to book a session with me. But I haven't been able to advertise it because every time I've tried, I go to Facebook and Google, they reject it. They say it's an unfounded claim. It's like, guys, it's not unfounded. I've healed like 400 allergies out of like, 400, right? So, a lot of allergies, addiction too,
Mhm.
with the caveat, you can only heal addiction when the addict genuinely desires change. That's the caveat. If
Hmm.
the, I had one woman, I remember she booked a session with me because she was a smoker. She didn't want to quit, but she just wanted to cut down a little. I'm like, yeah, it doesn't work that way, right? When you're ready to quit, give me a call. I had one of my buddies that I used to play D&D with. He had a problem with cocaine.
Hmm.
And I remember we did 3 sessions. The first time he'd gotten busted by the cops, legal bills, his wife was pissed, but he wasn't ready to quit. The second time, similar thing, he had gotten caught and, blah, 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 but wasn't ready to quit. The third time, he had gone on a bender in Las Vegas, blew through $90,000, their whole life savings on cocaine and prostitutes and gambling in 4 days. And his wife kicked him out, and his employees were about to all walk away from his company. And he came to me and he's like, Brent, I'm ready to quit drugs forever. And boom, bingo, it took.
Mhm.
So yes, addiction, trauma, physical diseases, pain, injuries. And can I guarantee a perfect result for everyone in a certain amount of time? I want to say no, it doesn't work that way. We don't pick the miracles, they pick us. What I've learned in creating the formula for miracles, what we're doing is we're facilitating the conditions of a miracle.
Mhm.
That's subtly different than making it happen. So falling in love is like that. Do you have a magic wand that can make someone fall in love with you? No. Or that can make someone fall out of love with you? The answer is no. but you can facilitate the conditions to make it more likely.
Hmm.
If you're growing a plant, you can't force a plant to grow 10 feet overnight, but you learn how much water and light and minerals to give it. You facilitate the conditions so it grows. And that's what we do. I learned how to work the subconscious to facilitate the conditions of miraculous healings.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm getting close to 2,000 medical miracles. And just so we're clear, I'm not talking about, oh, I like the energy. That's nice, but I don't count that. I'm talking about things that we can document with medical scans and things. So you take to your doctor. Another one was my mother. My mother was diagnosed with a clear cell endometrial cancer in 2010. And if you know anything about cancer, that's a death sentence.
Mm.
Their 5-year survival rate is like 2%. It's one of the worst. My sister is a nurse, and my sister cried nonstop for 2 days. And all I did was I had my mother come up. I got Carl and several of my students, and we all did an hour-long healing session on my mom. And what she said was she felt this warmth moving all through her abdomen. And we did this like 3 days before she was scheduled for surgery. And she had the surgery. And her oncologist after the surgery, he was like, Karen, I've been doing this for 32 years and I've never seen this before. Somehow all the cancer vanished from your body.
Hmm.
And he couldn't explain it.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I could bore you guys forever with stories, but do miracles happen? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I just don't want to feed misinformation. I'm not saying that I can guarantee a certain result for anyone.
Well,
That's not within human power.
you explained that very well and very beautifully, and this has been an amazing chat. We're going to wind this up, this talk with Brent Michael Phillips. Just incredible in depth, beautiful information. I got a lot to chew on my own end here, just thinking about this. But you do well. Real quickly, actually, I would like to know about your two books, "The Formula for Miracles" and "Movement Feedback Holography." I'm guessing you have more than those two because I think
Yeah,
that's
I've written 6 books. The,
six.
the the Formula for Miracles is the 3-book series that kind of explains my journey, how I got into this, and the science of energy healing. So for people that want to understand the hard science, the math and physics that explain miracles, that's what it's for. The Movement Feedback Holography book, it's funny, it took me 6 years before I was comfortable teaching or practicing what Carl taught me.
Hmm.
And it took me 10 years to understand it and 15 to write a book.
Wow.
So after 15 years of doing this full time, I think I understand it well enough. And so the movement book is for people that want to learn a little more. And you can get all of them on Amazon Kindle. But I want to make another offer to all your listeners, Carl. Anyone that wants to go to my website at awakeningdynamics.com, you'll see a little button that says podcast special.
Hmm.
Click that. I will give a free 15-minute call to anybody that wants to book. No charge, no credit card, nothing. The purpose of the call is for me to get to know a little about you to see if you're a good fit for me.
Hmm.
Because I'm not a good fit for everyone. I'm fast paced, I'm intense, I'm obsessed with the truth, right? If you want someone that's going to give you a big hug and wear crystals and tell you it's okay, that's not me. That's great. I have a lot of friends like that, right? But if you're the kind of person that wants the no nonsense, get in, you're willing to take time, money, energy, and focus, because it does take these things. There is no fix every problem in your life instantly for free. That'd be nice, right? I'm willing to, give everyone 15 minutes to see if you're a good fit. And if not, I'm happy to recommend you what I think is a good fit. No expectation.
That is awesome. Thank you for that offer. And just what is the best way for people to connect with you through your website?
Yeah, best thing is through my website at awakeningdynamics.com. Uh, I have a full-time assistant, check the email every day. You can also look for me on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Haven't gotten much traction on TikTok. Kind of gave up on that. Just doesn't fit me.
Yeah.
I don't know how I can teach you something meaningful in 20 seconds. You know, it's just not my generation.
Yeah.
But yeah, find me on social media. I have a very active Facebook group. I'm making a big push into Instagram, especially for those that love music. My passion project is combining music and spirituality.
I
Because
like.
I found by using microdose psychedelics, music, and special entrainments can facilitate an ecstatic transcendental experience. And
Wow,
that to me is life changing.
this is
That
pretty amazing.
every one of my transcendental experiences has been triggered by and involved music.
Yeah, yeah.
So music for me, that's the entry point, but you don't have to be into music. It's fine.
Well, next time we have you on, we'll have you play guitar there. We
Okay. That'd be cool. Yeah.
That'd be awesome. Well, Brent, Michael, Phillips, this has been amazing. I am, like I said, just astounding information to digest. Anybody who sees this or listens to it, listen to it over and over and over again because there's a lot to learn here. And connect with Brent, all right? He's amazing. Thank you for being on World
Oh,
Awakenings.
thank you, Carl. You're doing great work, and it's a pleasure to be here.
This has been another episode of World Awakenings, the fast track to enlightenment with host Carl Gruber, a certified law of attraction life coach. We welcome you to tune in to each and every episode of World Awakenings as we open your mind, your heart, and your eyes to the fact that the world's population is now, more than ever, awakening to the truth of all things spiritual, metaphysical, and enlightening, and just how much they play an all-important role in our moment-to-moment daily life. Much love and light to you, my friend, and thank you for tuning into World Awakenings.